Hello, everybody. Welcome to Go Global World. I'm the founder of the global community where founders meet each other from around the world, meet investors and mentors and advisors, and they are helping out each other to build international businesses. We are building digital Silicon Valley ecosystem where founders from around the world can enter different countries, can build international global businesses, of course, fundraising, and so much more. And today we have a special topic, and for this reason I invited Ron Zakay here. Hi, Ron. Good to have you with us.
Hello, everyone.
Ron is based in San Francisco, and he has an amazing story. And today we have a special topic, which is called How LGBTQ plus founders are supported in the United States. Well, we are a global community. We are supporting all people of all genders and minorities and everyone. So we truly want to focus on talented people and give them the tools, empower with everything possible so they can focus on their business. And this is talk exactly about that. We want LGBTQ founders to find their opportunities. Even they might not be in the United States, they might
Absolutely.
explore the opportunities, and maybe once they're in the States, they will use it, but maybe they open some example for themselves and build something in their local areas where they are. Well, here with me today, Ron Zakay, and he definitely has a story you want to hear because Ron is an expat from Israel. He turned San Franciscan native, and he's gay and throupled. Passionate DEI advocate, and as a serial entrepreneur with 2 decades of leading and co-founding several early stage startups, as well as mentoring dozens of startups with a strong focus on innovation in the automation, business intelligence, startups, and venture ecosystem. He's an evangelizer by nature and a prophylactic networker. Ron often speaks as a specialist, judge, and panelist at angel groups, accelerators, incubators. He likes to sharing his, he loves to share actually his passion for building with founders and firms like he likes to collaborate and support founders. And most importantly, we just spoke with Ron. He not only founder himself, and he has entrepreneurial experience, he's an immigrant, but also he invested in the companies as an angel investor, and he plans to do more in the future, but he mentors and advises to lots of startups. Well, Ron, welcome to Go Global World community.
Thank you.
We are excited to have you here. Tell us your story.
That's a resounding intro. Thank you very much, Daniel. Hi, everyone. I'm Ron Zakay. As Daniel pointed out, I'm an expat Israeli. I lived in San Francisco. Literally next week, it will be 20 years. Yes, I'm an entrepreneur. Yes, I have 2 male partners, obviously within the LGBTQ community. To tell my story, it's a story. So I was very fortunate as a child, pretty much to be introduced to the world of computing, pretty much as long as I remember myself, of course, first through gaming. And then I was lucky to work in the friends of my father in their office as literally tech support since about 15. And that evolved to a real job at Checkpoint Technologies, really, really early in my career, in my teens. Checkpoint Technologies back then was still a unicorn in the making. I was one of the first, I believe, 200 some employees. It was wonderful to see a hypergrowth startup. Of course, a teenager doesn't know that they're in the middle of a hypergrowth startup. But I was lucky and fortunate and very, very privileged to be in that position, which kind of propelled me both in my international career in general and kind of pulled me out of Israel. Now, on the LGBTQ side, there were many, many reasons I wanted to leave Israel because I grew up in an environment that, of course, was very, very hostile to gay men growing up. And between bullying to literally the legal systems themselves not allowing me to be me, and by virtue of people allowing themselves to be quite violent at you being you, that felt wrong. And the political climate in Israel didn't really lend itself to who I am as a person. I am a more collaborative person in nature, and I can't really understand hate over love, never. I understand survivability. That's a dangerous state to be in, and you need to do anything to kind of continue. But when you're not in a state of survival, I think humanity really prevails. So that point in my career, right after Checkpoint, before the dot-com crashed, I got to be very, very fortunate, and I got poached into a startup in Japan, which launched me to a career around the world. After trials and tribulations of many startups around the world, I landed in San Francisco again 20 years ago. And pretty much right off the bat, got into the entrepreneurial landscape. I had several ventures. To this date, I have about 8 to my name, with about, I don't know, 3 or 4 soft failures, about 1 very, very spectacular, of course, my first one, and a soft win. I have no problem talking about that later. And the reality of 20 years ago, San Francisco was more around the dot-com crashes reflection. And I think San Francisco is very interesting in a sense that it goes through a lot of iterations, but innovation, entrepreneurship will always be at the DNA of whatever it is. So even though it changes all the time, and I think all places change all the time, it's unfair to call any place static for 5 years or 10 years. But the reality of San Francisco, what was unique for me 20 years ago, to say I'm gay openly really did create some sort of headwind, or at least some form of either negative reaction or some demotion of whatever offer we're bringing to the table. So because I'm not like everybody else that gets invested, and I look like everybody else that gets invested, the moment they get that I'm gay, that kind of coming out moment, regardless of what it is, was always a negative until literally 15 years ago, and then progressively less so. Every 5 years, I would say there's like a really, really big shift. The most massive shift, and we'll talk about it later, is organizations that started creating and popping up about 10 years ago in San Francisco specifically, some nonprofit, some for-profit, all for entrepreneurship, all for LGBTQ, and very openly so. So my world was very separate, my gay world and my startup world, but over time it became circles that overlap, and then a Venn diagram, and now they're very much overlap. I'll pause there. We're at the present.
Right. Great story. Very interesting. And that I'm really glad that you made it to the US, and so you made your life so much better for yourself as I hearing your story. So how does your identity interacted with your vocation over the last 20 years in the Bay Area?
That's the story of my life in the Bay Area, because think of identity, specifically any underrepresented or overlooked founder will resonate with it probably even more than me, because I have the privilege of walking through the world as a white male. So until the point in which people know that my orientation is different, they don't really give me the difference or the oppression. That being said, there was oppression. So overlooked and underrepresented, my overlooked and underrepresented world was gay. And there was no, I think a good 5-10 years for me being in San Francisco, the beginning, first 5-10 years, to speak to my gayness in any professional environment would be not just a no-no, it would be downright not smart, downright diminutive to my offer or to my venture. It was better, it was smarter, it was safer to not expose myself, to not be safe, to code switch to a world in which I do not talk about my personal life. That over time, of course, the funny dichotomy is because the gay community is the gay community, and like all other communities, let's say the Jewish community in my world, or the Israeli community in my world, all communities see each other in community areas, in community gatekeeped areas. So I'm not Jewish by religion in any way, shape, or form. I'm pretty agnostic, actually. But let's say if I was Jewish and I was observing and I was going to a synagogue, of course I would meet the other Jews in my city, kind of like that, but think of it as a gay bar. So I was in this world that I couldn't talk about my entrepreneurship and my startups, or the amazing things that people will do around me, or I meet somebody in a bar or in a club that I met in my day life. My day life was completely separate from a quote unquote nightlife because we couldn't share them. That has changed. That is not just only change. Now it's even now it's a plus. Now, if you meet one of your friends from the entrepreneurship environment that's in a gay bar, and let's say they're gay or lesbian or transsexual or anything in between, you're a double ally. You're not just an entrepreneur with me, you're also underrepresented and overlooked and LGBTQ. We have 3 things that make us more similar, and it becomes an empowerment, not a negative. But 10, 20 years ago, you met them in a bar and we talked about how we can never say hi to each other when we meet each other. It was literally the opposite. So very much, it almost feels like the walls between my job or my vocation to the walls of my real life. 2 partners, been together many years, poly, which I think is unique in itself to some degree, different conversation, but nobody around me bats an eye or has a negative reaction to me being me. And I think that's the biggest triumph of the last 20 years here.
While living in the Bay Area, I've been to Castro, beautiful place, so much energy and really funny sometimes even in there. So like people are happy in there. It's great to see that these are just becoming a reality and more freedom for different people and with their different views on the world and how they want to be. I've been living in the Bay Area for like many years, not as many as you, like maybe 9 from being back.
And it's a lot.
Yeah, you are too many years. I'm joking. What makes the Bay Area such a unique place for you personally, being an expat from Israel?
I think being expat, and I think a lot of people would resonate it, when you grow up in a home country and you end up spending most of your life in a different country, that's the expat part. You become an expat when you spend more time in the new country than you did in your prior country or your home country. I think there's an element of choice that's very, very interesting. And I think people that come from any country for that matter, and they make a choice at the end of that sentence saying, you know what? They wake up one day, I think it's almost like coming out, but in a different way. It's kind of like, I don't like the world I'm seeing, or I don't like how the world sees me. I need to find a place that really sees me better, or I can be myself better, or I feel more at home. So in other words, each world location, country, state, county, I think they have their own rules and their own dynamics. And in reality, if we match ourselves to those dynamics, the evil or the more difficult is less so, and the good and the more empowering is more so. Yeah. For me, it was unequivocally the Bay Area, because it's really hard. I am an entrepreneur. I am a deep futurist, philosophy and sociology and otherwise, behavioral psychology, automation. We talked about machine learning, like all those things. Everything we use, what we're doing right now technologically, came from here in terms of that of innovation. And when you take that, plus also we're very socially open and accepting that human rights is across the board human, no matter what kind of human you are.
Absolutely.
This was the place, because I'm both. I want to invent and create crazy, wonderful things that make the world better for others. And I want to feel better in the world myself.
Of course. If you're limited with some frames, then you are unlikely to really innovate, open your full heart to your ideas, and being crazy on what you do, and sometimes making lots of mistakes. In the end, you'll find so many learnings and just build a beautiful solution. I totally agree with 100%. That. How do the entrepreneurship and venture landscape look to LGBTQ founders today? What are their options and what they can reach out to?
Wonderful question. I think it's way better than 20 years ago, if not completely different. It's literally 3 or 4 different worlds ahead of where it was before. And I think that is wonderful, because that's happening across the board. And I will talk specifically founder represented and overlooked founders, and then I'll go to general and specifically LGBTQ people here in the Bay Area and the world. So overlooked communities are starting to realize that there is a power in community, not value extracted community, but rather real community, that's collaboration of entrepreneurship, prowess, skills, know-how, access point, reach, basically what you're building. When we found that out as a community, that we have power in saying we're a community also in our vocation. In my case, it will be LGBTQ and in entrepreneurship. In the Bay Area, the LGBTQ community, literally, there are 3 organizations that I can spell out today. One of them is, there are a lot. There's Lesbians Who Tech, there's Startup, there's Gangels. Gangels is for-profit, a little kind of post-seed AB area. Startup is non-for-profit, which I have a whole story, because I've seen them in their inception after a pretty big breakup in my life. They were forming themselves in the living room of the house of the person I was renting the room from. So I've seen the inception of this non-for-profit, amazing organization called Startup, that is the the ultimate organization for LGBTQ in the Bay Area, and by the way, nationally. And I think it's getting to the point of globally to reach resources, both in terms of mentors, which since the moment of its inception, I've been a mentor in startup, and I think that's something I'll do forever, regardless of compensation, because that's my idea of paying back forward or paying it forward. But there's startup, there's angels, there's literally when you literally Google the words Bay Area, LGBTQ, entrepreneurship, and resources, you will have probably 2 pages. And then you had maybe less than one, if not one line, about 20 years ago. So you have 20 pages worth of choices, which really do go as granular as, are you a lesbian in tech that does UX? Are you a gay man that does founding for SES startup? Are you a transsexual that does packaged goods? And it can be that specific.
Wow.
You will find a cocktail hour or a group or a network that will help you directly with that.
Well, you touched on something that really reflects to me. You mentioned the phrase paying it forward. And what drives you to support so many people? Why are you doing this? And what challenges you face with supporting entrepreneurs, advising them? They're wasting so much time of yours, I guess.
There's a fine line, and I think a balance. And that's a very interesting idea in terms of, I think, becomes, when you look at oppression in general, when you look at community, any community that's going through any kind of systemic pressures against it, or friction for that community to participate in the greater world, any community, no matter what it is, because our nature was to realize that we either sit outside of what is normal or accepted, the reality of collaboration is almost baseline in our assumptions and therefore in our actions, because if we don't help each other, what are we really doing? Now, of course, like humans, you have the whole gamut of people that want to be more helpful or less helpful, people that can be more helpful, people that can't be more helpful. There's all of that. But in terms of my paying for it personally, I'm not that great when it comes to monetization of myself, and I never have been. That being said, because I came from a world very specifically that I've seen what the damage is, or hurt or pain, even in my vocational world, even in my vocational endeavors, that my identity can bring. In other words, me being me created harm or pain to my success, or to my investability, or to my sustainability as a founder or as a startup. Because I know what that looks like, I don't think I have a choice, period, to do anything less than be a shoulder or a step up for others, at least in some way, for them to have a little less of that friction. And if I can do it, great. To your point about my time, yes, time is finite. So I'm thinking more and more as I'm getting older and older, how can I leverage my time in a way that's more scaled? How can I scale the things that I have the friction in my life and give them to others in order for them to have better tools, better access? And I think you're literally the best example of how that looks like. Creating a community, leveraging whatever it is you created on one-on-one with your world. Now it can be one too many. That's exactly what I'm thinking about now. So thank you for you and your work, because that is a good template for what I can be doing that's not just one-on-one.
And we are happy to support you with what you do. Absolutely. This is exactly why we exist. And to me, paying it forward, before the community I built, I had a great network. I was enjoying it and it helped me a lot. So I built businesses because of this, and I helped others build lots of good businesses. But when I started this mission of helping other entrepreneurs, being an example of doing this, the amazing things starting happening, the doors starting opening to me that were always closed. Like I even didn't think of opening those high-level people doors. And they were like, oh no, I want you to be talking with me, not like you are coming to me. Like they were going up to me. And just because of this mission, because of you're doing this with open heart, you see that others are picking this as an example and started helping other people. Like this is such an amazing stuff. And it returns to you with a huge network, with huge support. And it's not easy. Yes, it's not easy, but you need to start, and all of a sudden you will be rewarded. You just don't understand maybe now how, but
absolutely,
it gets to you. Yeah. And yes, thank you for saying this. I usually say those things myself, but
well, okay, let's take a tangent. Let's take a side story. I think it's important, because systems are very specifically structured. I don't think anybody has malicious intent, ill intent, or harm intent in neither the way they finance startup, discover startup, or empower startup. I don't think there are any villains on any ivory towers with cigars and red velvet rooms, but it's really simple, I think, to think of system as optimizing for their own defriction. So if you're successful at raising money and making money in a certain way, that way will be really hard to change course because it works. And if the system works, there's no incentive, real incentive to change the system. And I think there's a wonderful thing to touch on today. And I think a lot of us smaller communities, being an immigrant, an expat, an LGBTQ, a woman, a Black or brown person, a differently able person, all these communities now are recognizing that this is a really interesting moment in our collective history globally, in our national history, and of course in the Bay Area, specifically because the Bay Area just projects technology to the rest of the world, in which we're starting to see that, wait, if we come together and we pull our resources together, we can do it differently. So things like crowdfunding and angel groups that are starting to literally form up. Angels is a group of angels, super angels that are LGBTQ, period.
Yep.
And they're extraordinarily, if not one of the most extraordinary, if not the top 5, I think even more than that at this point, when it comes to super angel groups. And the more you look at this ecosystem, the reality is like, oh, wait a minute. Yes, we might be a candle on our own, but we're as bright as the sun when we come together, and that's fine. And I have no what's the word, ill intent or even perception on how systems work. I love systems. I love optimizing for systems. I think there's a beauty in looking at things from the sideline. And I think being gay, immigrant, or sometimes both, any double group you have, you look at things from a window pane, like a clinical window pane, and then another one, you look at systems from the outside because you were always on the outside. Think of it, gay people that come out. I don't know what's wrong with me or what's different about me until I understand that, until society helped me in giving it a name. Until that moment, everything was weird, because everything that was normal for everybody else was absolutely not normal for me. That gives you the benefit of perspective, and it gives you a benefit of insight. And I think our innovations, immigrants, DI, overlooked, underrepresented, this is the moment in which it's all coming together and like, okay, great, financing looks this way, but we can do so many amazing things now, more than ever, together.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for touching on that. Well, coming back to finding LGBTQ founders. Well, what we see right now is that we still see low numbers of LGBTQ founders being funded. What can we do differently so more people of this minority group can be more funded with their great ideas if they really deserve it? How can VC discover more of them, in your opinion?
Bravo. I think it's this is by far the most passionate, the most kind of the pinnacle of my own personal self-actualization. That's where my work is my life and my life is my work. I really truly believe that data, just pure empirical data, be it structured or unstructured, once we open the door between, there's a world of financials, which is unit economics, it's called the fundamentals, and all startups need to be at least financially sound. That's the beginning. That's step one. Step two is actually a lot more human-centric that we give it credit for. And what I mean by that is when you are a founder, there is not often enough conversation around, is the founder to founder fit there? Is the founder to problem fit there? Is the founder to market fit there? And if you look at all those three, they're very behavioral psychology based. They're very personal. They're very, we call it the it factor or the pizzazz, or they have something unique. But in reality, it can be boiled down to a lot of very direct things. Are collaborative in your startup? Are you capable of hearing company dissent and say, oh, they're telling me something is wrong, but yes, I'm making the decision. Yet I'm not wasting time. There is no capital burn, or I'm wasting too much time on pivots or collaboration. There's both collaboration and hierarchical decision making, but there's a magic point in the middle that people can actually voice themselves. And I think both identity and psychological safety specifically, if you build a startup that says you come as you are, no matter who you are, and we'll accept you as you are, you will get significantly better returns. And there's a lot of data to back it up at this point, a lot, that if you're a startup that allows for differences, be it more women, more Black and brown people, BIPOC or BIPOC people, or differently able, or LGBTQ on your team in the first 10, the impacts and the waves of both the survivability of the startup, the investability of the startup, and the success potential of the startup, or exit potential of the startup grow significantly. So we have this weird world in which startups look one way in terms of investment, but the survivability and success of startups is way better if they were diversified. If they were actually not even diversified, because that's an unfair word, representative. 76% of the population, when I say underrepresented and overlooked, that's 76% of the population. When we say women, LGBTQ, black and brown people, BIPOC, and differently able, that's 76% of the population. Yet they account for about 16% of investment in total.
Oh my
How
God.
is 76% of the population is being represented by 16% of investment? So I look at it from a purely, and I love when capitalism operates ethically. And I'm not saying that because, oh, shame on you, wag my finger against capitalism. No, no, no. Capitalism is the reason for innovation. Capitalism is the reason for technological leapfrogs. Breaking it out to literally creating the next step between those two worlds. One investment that is not representative to representative in be it ventures, entrepreneurial startup ventures, or even founders or financing. The bridge is as follows. We walk away for whatever financial KPIs or success metrics we use to either scan, approve, not approve our funnel and our discovery. And we have started building a list that includes interesting questions like, again, behavioral psychology based and behavioral economics based. And you start looking or build a new data set that doesn't necessarily reflect, because unfortunately data as it stands right now looks backwards and present. And as I said, 60% of the population is 86% of the investment, and we can literally look at the opposite and look at opportunity. So I guess the bottom line of what I was saying in terms of economical opportunity, what we're making right now in venture capital, its entirety is about, I think, 180 nationally and about 300 some internationally. I think it's really just woefully underrepresented. And I'm not saying that is a cliche. I'm just thinking it doesn't represent the big pie. Because if everybody that could get an investment for a sound startup will get an investment, it will make a tremendous amount of money for everyone. It's a bigger pie. Yeah. And I think we're just looking at a slice of it. That's all.
In your opinion, is the system rigged against anyone different, or is there more to that assumption?
Perfect follow-up to what we just talked about. I think the system is just optimized to being less friction. I think most systems optimize themselves to reduce friction over time. That's just the nature of power is too abstract of a word. So that's why the word system, because you have a specific output. In investment, it's very clear. Your input is an idea and your output is an exit event. That's the entirety of it. So that system, the more the frictions, any step in the middle, which is, idea to wireframe, to MVP, to prototype, to market validation, to customer validation, to customer iteration, to beachhead, to scale. That. So if any one of those points, you can take a little bit of the pressure off or enhance or empower really good ideas and people, teams, people, ideas, you do better for the system. So we stand in a world, much like I said, that the venture capital is really good at getting those really great ideas, really well funded, and getting to the market and scale them and hypergrowth and velocity. But then on the other side, on the entrepreneurial side of the underrepresented and overlooked, we don't have the same mechanism because we don't look like financially and otherwise, demographically, financially, like the way that financing is now. So the way to solve it is, I don't think there's any rigging against anyone. I think it's just the nature of system to optimize. So it's our responsibility as people that stand from the outside of the system to maybe create a new system or help the current system see us.
Yeah. So if we take the situation like there is an international startup founder, he is entering the United States, for example. He is also a part of LGBTQ minority group, and his first time in there. What would be the main first 3 to 5 steps he needs to do to succeed as a founder in the United States, maybe in the Bay Area as well?
I think the answer is very similar to both because COVID, as traumatic as it was and still is to some degree, kind of opened the door to even this conversation right now between you and I. It kind of took the gatekeeping or geofencing of the Bay Area and softened it a little and opened a little bit more doors and a little bit more bridges between people across states, across countries. I think that is wonderful. I think that is a wonderful first step. So to that founder that walks into the United States or to the Bay Area, the simplest answer, and it's the silliest and the most cliche, Google where you are and Google your identity and put the word startup and put the word organization and see what comes up, because there's about 100% that will be something around you, that there's a community, there's a cocktail hour, there is a meet and greet, there is a networking event, there will be something, no matter where you are. In the Bay Area, there'll be too many. So in the Bay Area, I would recommend, just because I'm biased and I'm a big fan of Lorenzo and Andres, which is the CEO of Startup, and Lorenzo is both in Gay Angels and in Startup. They're amazing people around me that do amazing work. And if there, I would start from Startup, because Growth Lab, the accelerator of Startup, is very much LGBTQ and very, very specific, with really, really sharp people helping startups basically grow really quickly. But yeah, in the Bay Area, specifically Startup, I think Startup has a lot of now new chapters and events almost everywhere. So no matter where you land in the United States, check Startup first, because I'll plug them as much as I can because I love them. But in reality, it's Startup and other things. It's Startup and Gay Angels. It's Startup and there are small VCs that are starting now that are just primarily LGBTQ. Chasing Rainbows is one, led by Ben. It's brilliant. It's I believe it's just Google Chasing Rainbows VC. There are 360 Ventures in Miami. There is so many. If I came here 20 years ago, but today, my next 20 years would have been very, very different. But I'm so happy that I got to see both.
Even if you're introvert or shy, you still can Google it, like using just basic keywords like LGBTQ startup or something in your area where you are. It can show you some options to meet, and so you can start networking. And but in my opinion, I've seen this community being so supportive. So at least one person can open you the network to wide the community.
So true.
So just you need to start. I totally agree with you. I think this is where people can.
Your description of networking effect is always a multiple of where you were before. Like when we start a community, it's 1-to-1 and then 1-to-many, but then it's many-to-many, and that's the magic. When it gets to many-to-many, it suddenly becomes this amazing. Somebody will help somebody. The moment somebody asks for help or needs help, there'll be an automatic matchmaking.
Exactly, and if it's all based on similar values, then wonderful things happening. Like really, things accelerate, and you become happy and successful at the same time. So absolutely. I have a final question to you.
Yes.
How does one reality become the change or betterment they want to see in the world?
You know that saying, yeah. I love that question. It's a wonderful note to end on. You know, there are so many cliches that are so because they're based on truths. And one of those truths is, I am not going to have children. I want to leave a legacy. And when you think of the term legacy, it can come in so many ways, but the reality really boils down to something much simpler. We are often the change we want to see in the world, but once we see where the world is not necessarily either acting up to the promise that we want it to step up to, or we are aware of making that promise better. And I always joke the difference between the American dream to actually actualizing the American dream. Don't keep it a dream, make it a reality. Like all entrepreneurs, it's your venture, it's your startup to take this American dream and make it a reality. So by virtue of me being where I am, which is between DEI, automation, and the venture landscape, I am responsible because I see where not the flaws, but where the points of improvements and growth points and reducing friction and fail points. Because I see that, it is my job as both an entrepreneur and a gay man and an expat to make the road to anybody behind me or coming around the bend behind me, to make it a little easier for them, and whatever I can do in terms of a product or a company. And yes, I'm working on all of those. Those are my irons in the fire. That is my job. If I see the problem, it's my job to solve it.
Absolutely.
Or at least be a part of the solution, or at least be a part of the solution.
Well, I think we've had a great conversation. Thanks for sharing this opinion, details, and maybe inspiring other people that are trying to get to their dream place and build their dream company. And maybe this can help them to make the next step. My final question to you after the final question is that
yes.
What do you, so closing this session, what do you have on your mind, on your heart, sharing with the audience of Go Global World, with LGBTQ community as well, that are starting? So what would be on your heart and mind? And while you're thinking, I would like to ask everyone who is watching us to please press the like button, subscribe to our channel, write your comments below. Tell Ron what you're thinking of our conversation. Maybe you have some questions, we'll be happy to answer them, to support you. And of course, share this video to help more entrepreneurs around the world with similar problems and issues, or maybe just inspire them on more things to do. And at Go Global World, we are supporting all kinds of entrepreneurs just because you are building beautiful stuff, amazing value in the world that makes our world a better place. And if you want to be part of our community, just go on Go Global World, goglobal.world, and register your profile, and you'll be our member and interact with people like Ron and me and others.
Thank you.
And so
that is a wonderful ending. So first, before we end, thank you, Daniel, for this opportunity. It's been wonderful to talk about this. And I always muse, and I think I overthink, and I think it's just part of my nature. So it's a wonderful question to end on. What I will tell anyone: entrepreneurs are not just unique creatures in the sense that they take an idea and they birth it into reality for everybody else, but I also think we're very, very cognitive. Our cognitive dissonance around, on one hand, as an entrepreneur, generally speaking, you have a very, very clear idea of everybody's future, and it's in your head in the present. And your job, your entire job, is translating that into everybody else's present, taking that thing in your head that exists in everybody else's future in your mind, like, why is that not there? And your job, your entire role, is to monetize that thought and bring it to life. Both, because that's the will and oil of life. So what I would say to any entrepreneur, and especially now when we're introducing this idea of identity, the more you lean into your identity, the more you lean into the frictions, hardships, problems, the more you take ownership of the things you see that are either flawed or inefficient. And you have not only the passion, because I think passion is literally the #1 ingredient for all of us. And I will say to all entrepreneurs, be it white, male, straight, to pretty much everybody else across the board, from every corner of the world, this is the time that your identity is actually going to be an asset. Your identity is your competitive advantage. Your identity is a unique perspective on how to make it better for others, and only you see that future for me. Therefore, it's your job to translate that future in your head to my reality. And when you do so, my world will be better. So please get on it.
Sounds inspiring. That was Ron Zakay, and we spoke on how LGBTQ plus founders are supported in the United States. Thank you so much, Ron. Please stay here. Everyone, thanks for watching us, and we look forward to see you soon, and support us on social media, and thank you for watching. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Take care.